And we're going to look at this topic of shaping. This is also something described in your reading, and it's something that B.F. Skinner sort of made famous because he would teach pigeons how to peck at a light, for example, to get food. And then there's this contraption called the Skinner box that uses a food reward to train a rat to press a bar. Shaping is a way of training an organism, a person or other animal, to do something that they don't normally do, that they don't know how to do at the moment, and you gradually develop the skills to be able to get there. So it's sometimes called the successive approximation procedure because you successively approximate what your end goal is. You get closer and closer and closer to it very gradually. So it's a technique of gradually developing a desired behavior by first selecting something that is already happening, that the person or animal can already do, and then slowly changing the contingency for a reward so that you don't reward them until they take the next step, which might be just a little bit more challenging. And step by step by step, you gradually increase the requirement for the reward until they're doing the desired behavior. But you start with something that is already possible and already occurring. So we're going to look at training a rat to press a bar using, again, the Skinner box. And we're going to see that there are 4 steps. The first step is reinforcing the rat for eating out of the food dispenser. You'll see that that's really easy. It just has to go over and smell the food and eat it. Step 2 is reinforcing the rat for moving towards the bar. Step 3 is reinforcing for sniffing the bar. And then step 4, reinforcing for touching and pressing the bar. Okay, so there's a little rat, and he's just exploring. The box here is the bar, and the food will be delivered below it. So every time he puts his nose or his hands near the bar, he's going to get food. And you saw where he's sticking his nose in there? That's where he's getting his food. Now, no more food's coming. He's like, hey, where'd the food go? But it will be delivered whenever he gets close to this area. So if he's just here in this area approaching the bar, he's going to get food. Now they're going to make him actually sniff the bar. No food, no food. Oops, food. So whenever this green dot comes over here, you can see that he's getting food. And once again, once he sniffs the bar, he's looking around. Hey, where'd that food go? Up, sniff the bar, and he gets his food. And so they're going to do that for a while until the rat is regularly sniffing the bar. And now they're going to make him touch the bar with his hands. And so as soon as he does that, he'll get food. So now you see, aha, as soon as the hands are on the bar, he gets food. But sniffing the bar is no longer enough. Now pressing the lever. So there we go. Now having his hands on the lever is not enough. He actually has to press the lever down and get his food. So it gradually worked up to pressing the bar for food. And once the rat gets the hang of it, he's consistently pressing the bar and getting food. So you can see that shaping gradually leads to a more complex behavior being done. And all those TV commercials where animals do amazing things, they're done using shaping, right? A rabbit doesn't begin playing the piano from the very beginning. They shape it until it gradually starts doing something where it looks like it's playing a piano, for example. Now, when we're using shaping or other types of procedures to deliver a reward with the goal of changing an animal or a person's behavior, we need to consider how often the reward is given, and that gets us to this topic of schedules of reinforcement. So the schedule of the reinforcement is basically looking at how often a reward is given and when it is given. And there's 2 ways that we can divide this up. One is depending on the number of times an activity is performed, and so that is called a ratio schedule. Ratio schedule can be either fixed or variable. Fixed means that it's going to be steady, like every 3 times, every 5 times, every 10 times an activity is performed, there will be a reinforcement given, a reward given. Variable is very similar, except instead of it being 1, 2, 3, reward, 1, 2, 3, reward, 1, 2, 3, reward. It'll be on average every 3 times reward. And so that would be maybe 1, 2, 3, reward. But then the next time, after only 2 times that the behavior is done, a reward is given. And maybe the next time, the behavior might have to be done 3 times or 4 times or 5 times before the reward is given. But on average, it'll be every 3 times or every 4 times on average or every 5 times on average. So you can see that a fixed ratio is super predictable. 1, 2, 3, reward. 1, 2, 3, reward. 1, 2, 3, reward. So that if I have to fold 3 shirts to make $1, for example, then I know that I fold 3 shirts, I just made $1. Fold another 3 shirts, make another $1. And so I'm going to get quick, but I'm also going to know exactly when I'm going to be rewarded. And so that leads to more predictable outcomes. Variable ratio, I don't know exactly how many shirts I have to fold to be rewarded, right? So I might work a little bit more quickly, it turns out, with variable ratio. And I'm also going to be more likely to continue and persist doing it. So let's think about this. If I know I'm going to get rewarded every 3 shirts that I fold, I'm going to get paid $1. And I do 3 shirts and I don't get paid. And for like the last month that I've been doing this, I have gotten a reward. I gotten my $1 after every 3 shirts. And all of a sudden I don't. I'm going to very quickly go, hey, something's wrong here. This is no longer working. In contrast, if I have been on a variable ratio reward system, because it's not as predictable, I might do 3 shirts and then 4 and then 5 and still not get rewarded. But I may not start realizing, I may not really know if I'm no longer going to be rewarded or not because, well, it's never been very predictable. Sometimes I got rewarded after 1 shirt was folded, and sometimes after 5 shirts were folded. Sometimes after 6 shirts were folded. The average was 3, but it was really variable. So because this one's really variable, if the reward is ended and I'm not explicitly told, I don't really know. And so I'm going to persist. And I'm going to keep at it in the hopes of getting another reward. And it turns out that variable ratio is the approach used by slot machines. Gambling is very much on a variable ratio schedule. You don't always win. You don't always get a reward for doing it. It's certainly on a variable ratio schedule. It's not very predictable. And what that means is that a person plays on a slot machine, for example, and they win once, and then they play some more, and play some more, and play some more, and win again, and then they play, and win some more. When they continue playing and nothing gets paid out, they don't win for a while, they're going to be more likely to persist in playing and playing and playing, hoping for that reward to come, because the reward was never super predictable, and that kind of hooks us a little bit, and we keep trying and trying because we have an expectation that it can pay off at any moment. The other type of schedule reinforcement is based on time. So this one has to do with the amount of time that has passed since the last reinforcement. Now you still have to do something, so it's not just wait for the time to pass. You have to wait for the time to pass, and then if it's folding shirts, then I can fold a shirt and get paid for it. And this one can also work on a fixed interval schedule, which maybe might say, oh, I have to wait a fixed interval of 10 minutes before the next shirt I fold will get rewarded. And maybe my boss does this so that I don't just rush through and do a sloppy job. They want me to do a careful job, and so they don't want to rush me, and they might give me a fixed interval like that. Variable interval is super similar to fixed interval, except it's variable, and so it won't be exactly 10 minutes. This one's less predictable. I might get rewarded after 8 minutes. I might get rewarded after 12 minutes, but the average will be 10 minutes. And so I'm going to have to wait a certain amount of time, but I don't know exactly how long to wait. And so I'm going to start folding shirts, for example, after 6 or 7 or 8 minutes, and in the hopes that at some point I'll get rewarded. And that's the idea for a variable interval, is that there's some uncertainty and that you don't know how long you have to wait for the next reward. And so you might start engaging in the behavior in anticipation. So here are some examples. So imagine you're a telemarketer that gets reinforced with money after every third person you call and speak to. That would be an example of a fixed ratio. It's fixed because it is exactly every third person, and it's ratio because you have to call 3 people. It's the behavior. You have to do this 3 times in order to get your pay. If instead you're a telemarketer who is reinforced with money after every third person on average that you call and speak to, that would be an example of variable ratio. This one again is less predictable because it is variable and you don't know exactly when you're going to get paid. Now let's look at the scheduled reinforcement that depend on the amount of time since the last reward that you got, the last time you got paid. So these are all going to be intervals, and I have here the clock just to remind us. The first one will be a fixed interval. So remember, fixed means it's going to be predictable. And same thing, you're a telemarketer who is reinforced with money for placing a call. But no reinforcement can be given within exactly 10 minutes of the last time you got rewarded. So if you got paid, you got some reward, you have to wait 10 minutes before you're eligible for another reward. And so that would be an example of fixed interval. So what would happen is you talk to a person, you place the call, you try and sell them something, you end that call, and there's really no rush to call another person because you're going to have to wait 10 minutes before calling another person will get rewarded. And so you're going to sit there, take a little break, and then at the end of that break in 10 minutes, you'll call someone else and get paid again. Variable interval is very similar, except again, it's the amount of time that you have to wait between calls is less predictable. It's going to be on average 10 minutes, but it might be 6 minutes, might be 14 minutes. So the reason that these schedules of reinforcement are important is that how hard someone works and how fast someone works are very much influenced by them. The interval schedules, as you might imagine, encourage people to take breaks, right? So these definitely encourage working at a not super fast speed and encourages people to take breaks. Some professions where you don't want people to work continuously, like, for example, being a driver, a trucker. Yes, the more miles a trucker drives, perhaps the more they get paid, but you also don't want them driving 24 hours a day because they're going to be sleepy and be dangerous. So you might create a fixed interval where you only get paid for driving so many miles, but then once you've done that, you have to wait, say, 8 hours before you can drive another set of miles and get paid for those. So the interval schedules encourage people to take breaks. The ratio schedules encourage people to not take breaks because you're paid based on how much you do and you're going to work more quickly. The difference between the fixed ratio and the variable ratio is that the variable ratio is going to keep people doing it even after the reward is stopped. And there is extinction in instrumental conditioning just like there is in classical conditioning. And so when the reward ends, we should stop doing the behavior, right? If you're on a fixed ratio schedule, you know immediately when the reward ends, and so we tend to stop right away because you knew to expect it every 3 calls that you would get paid. If you stop getting paid, you know exactly that this is now different and you're going to not get paid anymore, so you'll stop. And so you're going to persist a little longer and you're going to be what's called resistant to extinction. You're going to continue doing it longer and longer and longer because it's just less predictable. So you don't really know that you're no longer being reinforced. So that's the difference between these two, that the ratio schedules encourage us to work kind of quickly and the interval schedules encourage us to take breaks. Another thing we're going to look at is that the value of reinforcement is relative to what you've received before. And these are what are called contrast effects, that there's contrast between what I'm paid now and what I was paid before. And so it points to the importance of like our past experience. And we all, I think, can kind of relate to this because it becomes relevant with how much we got used to being paid for working. There's what's called the depression effect or negative contrast, which is when you go down in pay. So shifting from making $30 an hour to making $25 an hour might lead you to work a little less than if you'd always been paid $25 an hour. Why? Because of this negative contrast from $30 to $25. And so you're going to be not as happy making $25 an hour if you have a history of making $30 an hour. In contrast, shifting from $20 an hour up to $25 an hour might actually be more motivating. It might encourage you to work harder than if you'd always been paid $25 an hour. And that would be the elation effect. You're happy to be making more than you used to. And so $25 an hour seems great. And that would be an example of positive contrast. So what's important here? It's not that you're paying someone $25 an hour. It's that the person for whom $25 an hour is more than they used to make, they're going to be really happy and much more motivated to work for $25 an hour as opposed to the person who's working $25 an hour, but they used to making more than that. So if you've ever wondered why employers always want to know how much you used to make at your last job, that is why. They don't want to bring someone on who's going to be disappointed and not very motivated to work for less than they used to make.